Hello everybody and welcome to a parking lot. I'm Chase.
And I'm Joby.
And this is the Overrun.
This is the 2024 Acura Integra Type S. It's the twin brother to the Civic Type R. It has a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine which makes 320 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. Now, obviously there's a number of changes to make this more of a performance-oriented version of the Integra, like badging and other things, but we're gonna get all into everything here in just a moment, but let's start off by talking about its engine. And now, let's talk about the engine. This is a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Like I said, it makes about 320 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, which shoots this thing to 60 miles an hour in about 5.1 seconds. Now, this is front-wheel drive only and also a manual only, which makes it very, very exciting and fun to drive and shift through all the gears and hear all of the turbo 4-cylinder sound that Honda has been known for a very long time. It has a red line of 7,000 RPM, and it even has one last interesting feature, which is carbon fiber on the engine, which is interesting. It looks nice, and even has this little red kind of valve gasket like cover thing, but yeah, it looks great in here.
So let's talk a little bit about the Integra Type S and pricing and competitors and etc. This car right here has one single option on it. It is the fantastic platinum white pearl paint. It's $600. That brings the total as delivered cost of this vehicle to $52,595. And this car's chief competitor is also a small hatchback, because this is technically a hatchback. It's the Golf R. That car starts at $44,640, and it also uses a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, but it has an optional automatic, as many of you may know. That produces, we're gonna keep using the cheat sheet here because I have ADHD. It's 315 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. The Integra Type S also competes with the Audi S3, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to mostly stick with the Golf R because it feels a little bit more fair to the Type S, given the Golf R's pricing, the Integra's pricing, and also the fact that the Audi S3 is just a nicer Golf R. Now, inside the Integra Type S, this is effectively a Honda Civic and or Acura Integra interior, and a lot of the stuff that you interact with that isn't specific to the Type S will feel just like your standard run-of-the-mill Civic and or Integra. For example, the climate controls, which are blessedly physical in nature. They even have this nice finish on them that doesn't like pick up fingerprints quite as easily, and the same is true of this slightly smaller screen. I'm actually a fan of the smaller screen. It's closer to your line of sight and is not as distracting as some of the extra super huge screens that you tend to get in some luxury cars. The steering wheel is nice and thin. It's got this nice perforated leather on it and some Type S badging, which is specific to this car. There's also a digital dash, which is more or less the exact same one that you'll find in the Honda Civic, the Civic Type R, the Civic Si, the Integra, etc. Now, I'm not a super huge fan of this piano black. It's kind of annoying that everything else in here has this grayish textured plastic material. It's actually quite nice. And then, of course, the one area that you're going to interact with the most, the area surrounding the parking brake, drive modes, and shifter, is piano black. I just don't understand it. If you wear watches like I do, you'll also start to scratch up the piano black trim, which is, again, a little bit annoying. But there's a manual transmission here, and boy, is it nice. We'll get to that more in the driving impressions, but for right now, what I also want to talk about is how this stacks up against the Volkswagen Golf R. As some of you may have heard, the new Golf interior is leaving a little bit to be desired in terms of material quality. Now, that is not the case with the Integra Type S. That's because it's fully loaded. Acura is a little bit more street luxury focused than Honda. So you get these nice Alcantara inserts in the seat that has some red leather backing to them. And then obviously also quite a lot of red leather on the center stack, bolsters, and some nice Type S badging embossed in the headrests. In all, it's a very nice interior. I certainly prefer it to the Golf R's interior, especially in terms of usability. Now, in the back, the playing field is a little bit more even. I am sitting behind myself right now. I'm 5'7", 5'8" on a good day. If I stand up straight like mommy says to, I have plenty of room back here. I also have a good bit of headroom, but if I start to recline too much, the top of my hair is now touching this cross bracing right here. You won't have that issue in the Golf R because it is a hatchback. Now, the material quality definitely falls off a lot more in the back in the Volkswagen products, whereas here you have overwhelmingly the same materials that you'll find at the front. You still have this red leather, and a lot of the plastics, etc., are largely the same. I am not a fan of the fact that Acura ditches a 5th seat for these cup holders, considering they don't pass the big water bottle test. You have to keep this in the seat back pocket. But other than that, it's a pretty nice place to spend some time. I wouldn't hesitate to be stuck back here for a few hours. However, if you're a little bit taller, you might find some issues with the headroom and ingress and egress.
Now that Chase has covered all the interior bits, let's talk about cargo space. The Integra has 24 cubic feet of cargo space, whereas the Golf R only has 20. Now, with the Golf R, you have a lot more vertical room because it's a traditional hatchback design, whereas this, you just don't really have that. So depending on what items you're putting in back here, those are effectively pretty much going to cancel each other out and essentially be the same.
Okay, so what's it like to drive the Acura Integra Type S fast? Well, look at this elk. Yeah, that's an elk. Anyways, what's it like to drive the Acura Integra Type S fast? Well, for starters, if you have driven a Honda Civic Si or a Honda Civic Type R, it will feel very familiar. This is, after all, the exact same gearbox. That said, Acura has told us that the Integra Type S is a more street-oriented car, and it certainly feels it when you start to drive quickly. There's a little bit more body roll, there's also quite a bit less road noise, and on top of that, there's, very blind there, and on top of that, it just feels a little bit less manic than the Type R because of that stiffer suspension that's in the Type R. You also don't have a giant wing in your rear view mirror. Now, you can do that classic front wheel drive thing, brake really late, turn it in hard, stay in the power early, on the gas way before the apex, and ride that torque band out. And on top of that, you have this absolutely stellar manual transmission to accompany you the whole way. Now, speaking of the manual transmission, I do have a singular complaint with the way that this car drives, and that has to do with the rev matching system. For the last 20 years, Nissan has had a similar rev match system in its Z sports cars, and you have been able to turn that off with a button that is down here by your knee. Now, in the Integra Type S, what you have to do is you have to pull over, like I'm going to do right now. You have to pull over, stop the car entirely, put the parking brake on. Now you have to hit the home button, tab over to the vehicle settings menu, hit driver assist system, scroll to the very bottom, hit rev match system, and then turn the rev match system off. You've been passed at this point by every cyclist that you have just angered by your spirited driving. Then you can get back on the road after, of course, turning the parking brake off, which you'll forget to do, and stall the car. And then you can go back to rowing your own gears the way that God intended, with a little bit of heel-toe downshifting. Now, this aside, the differential, fantastic. The tires, fantastic. I even like the steering. Really, I honestly just have absolutely no notes for the Integra Type S. It is probably the best driving front-wheel drive sedan hatchback thing on the market. It's absolutely phenomenal. And for $52,000 in front-wheel drive, well, I just don't think that it gets any better than this.
And now for my drive impressions of the Integra Type S. Chase touched on the transmission a lot, which I would echo a lot of the same sentiment there, but I really want to touch on the engine. Now, again, this is a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo, makes about 320 horsepower, and when you're driving these, back sort of windy, twisty roads, it feels like the power is instantly available, or it feels like it's very readily available, especially after or past 2,000 RPMs, which is awesome. It makes, the driving experience much more fun and engaging, and obviously you have the manual transmission to make it even more engaging. My biggest complaint with the Type S is the seats. To me, the seats are nowhere near as aggressive as they should be in terms of like the bolstering and overall support for performance-oriented driving. I want the bolsters to be much bigger so they actually lock me into the seat, so that when I'm driving fast through curvy, bendy roads like this, that I'm not sliding all about and, really uncomfortable in this type of driving. Now, obviously, Acura has made this very clear that they are gearing the Type S towards street driving. It is not meant to be a race car. It's not meant to be taken to a track. It is simply geared towards driving on the street. And because of that, the seats are geared much more to a wider audience, but it's really good for street driving. Now, in terms of street driving the Type S, this thing is very comfortable to drive. The ride is not harsh. I wouldn't describe this car as having a harsh ride at all. Of course, you still feel some bumps, but nowhere near as much as you would in something like the Type R, presumably. And for that reason, it makes it a great daily car to drive, which is what Acura set out to do. It's supposed to be a thrilling car to drive, but provide all of the comforts that a normal street car would, which it does. And for me, that makes this car one of the best cars I've driven all year, and just, you know, something that would be hard not to recommend to someone who's looking to purchase a car in this segment. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Fuck it, whatever. Integra Type S. We both think that it drives better than the Golf R, or think that it would drive better than the Golf R. It's better than the Golf R. Even with the money, it's worth it. I love the transmission. It's probably one of the great manual transmissions. I have sat in and rode the gears in some of the newer Porsches, and I would put this just shy of that. It's as great as the Miatas, which is the other benchmark at this kind of price point segment enthusiast car spot in the market. It's fantastic. Another highlight for me was definitely the differential. It's really, really progressive and linear in the way that it locks up. It gives you an absurd amount of confidence and therefore grip. I love that you can do that front wheel drive thing where you really just slam on the brakes into a corner and let the diff pull you out. And on top of that, the brakes hold up while you're doing it.
Yeah, so for me, my highlights, I loved driving this car, still love it. I mean, I'll get to drive it again after you're seeing this clip, but yeah, it's an amazing car. For me, biggest things are the infotainment system and just the interior, the way Honda lays out their interior, and obviously that extends to the Acura. It's just great. There's buttons for almost everything except for the
Rev matching,
which
thank
is
you. Super annoying.
Yeah,
that's both of our. That's one of maybe 3 or 4 complaints.
Yeah, but other than that, I really don't have any complaints with the interior. There's everything I'd want in there from a comfort and just sort of convenience sake. The other thing is there's adaptive cruise control, which is very rare on a manual car, and it works really well here. All the assists and everything are just fine. They would function just like they would in any other car, and there's no exception here, which is awesome to see, again, because of that manual transmission. And the last thing I want to touch on, which we didn't dedicate an entire segment to, is the design. I have been a fanboy of Volkswagen and German cars for a long time, but I really wanted to take just a few seconds to talk about the design. I absolutely love the way this thing looks, those huge wheel arches and the wider stance of the Type S.
No fake vents.
There's no fake vents, which not even the Supra could do. And this thing just looks amazing. It drives amazing. There's really nothing about it. And I think that Acura has accomplished what they wanted to in the Type S, which was to, you know, build the ultimate street performing version of the Integra, which again, I think they've done, and I would highly recommend, if you can, test driving this one and potentially buying one if you have the funds to do so.
Yep, and if I may make a recommendation, please do remember to like, subscribe, etc., etc. It really does help us out. Hit the little notification bell as well, so that you get a notification every time our annoying faces are on the internet. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great week.
Bye!